All right, we did it. Technology's cooperating this morning. Hello, everybody. It's Ted Bogert. We're back with the TED Show. I'm here with my friend from afar, David Hennessey. He's a great instructor, teacher, philosopher, funny man. And we're going to continue our series. And we're going to talk today about how to improve your focus. Don't you feel like, everyone, I know I do, that you've lost focus this year? There's too many things to try to figure out, and it's all new, and you can't concentrate or focus on anything, and then something new comes up that you hadn't dealt with before. It's been a year of challenges, and I think a lot of people are feeling that I can't focus, I can't concentrate haze. Indeed. So I'm very, very excited to have David back on, and just so you all know, we have a teeny bit of a time delay. And so hopefully I will be quiet long enough for David to express all of the wonderful things that he's going to express. Welcome back, my friend.
Thank you very much, Ted. And thank you for everybody who's listening. And on my side, too, I hope I don't interrupt you, Ted, with a little bit of delay that we have.
You'll be great. All right. Tell them a little bit about the Wonder Technique. And you, just a little, since this is our third or fourth, at least third, I think.
It's our
so
fourth.
they know enough, and I want to take a deep, it's our fourth.
Yes.
I want to take a deep dive on this because I think it's very important. So tell them a little bit about you.
Okay. Hello, everybody. A little bit about the Wonder Technique, which is really a holistic program to personal development. And when I say holistic, it's because I bring together a lot of different ideas that are mostly discussed nowadays as separate. When people talk about improving your health and well-being, they talk about exercise. Other people will talk about mindfulness. Other people will talk about, the importance of sleep. We've had a lot of talks here with Ted about the whole idea how everything comes together. And today's focus on concentration is brought to you really to show you another example of what's going on inside the Wonder Technique. And I've been teaching the Wonder Technique for 20 years. But I want to share a little bit of a story, if I may, as to how detrimental focus can be when you don't have it in my own life. If I may share, Ted. In 2004, okay, thank you. In 2014, I was involved in a rock climbing accident. In fact, I had just started rock climbing, and I was descending down a wall. And normally, it may sound very strange, but instead of just kind of going down or jumping down the last bit, because this was indoor climbing at the time, I actually jumped the last bit, which wasn't very high, but because I wasn't really focused, I landed incorrectly. And what happened was, I didn't realize it right away, but I had dislocated my back. And it happened, the body is very resilient and hides things. But it was 2 days later that I ended up going to a hospital and finding out that I'd created 2 huge hernias, which ultimately, without going too much into this in detail, left me unable to walk for 6 months. Now, what I learned in part of my process of healing was the importance of being concentrated as much as possible. And I will end that not such a good story with a really positive outcome to say that in 2018, I might have shared this with you before, Ted, in 2018, I tested my body by doing my first ever marathon. I'd never done a marathon before. And I decided in March 2018, a friend called me and said, "Are you interested?" And I went and I ran the marathon in Greece. And so, sometimes people say, is this guy making up stories? Because some of these things, everybody has something that's happened in their life that sounds so strange. But this is my finisher's medal that I have here. Just proof in the pudding, as they say, right? From doing it. And it's a heavyweight thing, But I was so thrilled that I actually finished the marathon and without injury, without pain, because I promised myself if my back acted up, if my legs were sore, I wouldn't finish. Now, what we're going to talk about focus and concentration today, and what I really wanted to bring people's attention to, you can do incredible things when you focus your mind. And sometimes a lot of people, as you know, Ted, they'll try and do too many things at once, right? Will we agree on that? We try and do too much. Yes.
I'm guilty.
Yes, and over time myself too, but I
guilty
worked to train my mind. Yes. So one of the things that, to be very clear, is that when we try and do multiple things at once, there's actually a penalty psychologically that we pay, because every time we move from one task to another, my friends, we actually have a psychological, shall we say, a reload of our brain. It's like you're reloading a program on your computer or moving from one program to another. There is a delay, there's energy that's used as you move from one task to another. So you can actually find yourself more fatigued when you don't focus on the task at hand. So there's a penalty that we get when we don't focus on things. So the very first thing that I would recommend to you that are listening and you're trying to grab some information from what I'm sharing today, is that you need to decide, really need to decide that the action you're going to work on, that you're committing to it. Okay, the first part of focusing well is committing to what you're going to do. And when you commit, you're not just interested in completing the tasks. Now, this doesn't matter what it is, a small work task, completing a podcast, writing a paragraph for your future book, going for a walk, going for a run, whatever, cooking a meal. You just need to commit in your mind. That's the first step, is the commitment. Okay, so you want to really commit. And then what I always really believe is that you want to write it down. I write down my commitments to myself. Have you ever done that, Ted? You write down?
Absolutely. It's the only way for me to get anything done, is to write that kind of stuff down. Otherwise, I'm like squirrel, shiny object. You just don't, you can't focus. I have to write it down. And
Yes.
I kill myself sometimes as I write too much down, which I want to talk about at some point. Because I think that we're all guilty of what you said. We're all guilty.
Yes. Yes. So the first thing, and I like to play with images a little bit myself here. So the first thing I would say is that, like here is the letter I. Okay, if anybody can see this here, if there's anybody watching. If not, I'm holding up a piece of paper with an I on it. And the reason why I've got that there is I am making a commitment to myself, not to somebody else, but to myself, that I want to achieve this task. Now, the task may be assigned by somebody else, but I am committing to myself to do this. And the very first thing that I want to do is I want to basically take this letter I here and turn it on its side. I'm playing here with the camera. And what I'm doing here is this I becomes a minus sign. And the key to actually becoming more focused is to take away things, my friends, that are distracting you. Okay, it's not about adding things, it's about distracting you. Okay, so you want, for example, like my phone right now is, it's somewhere over to my left here, but it's on airplane mode, so it's not going to distract me. Okay, so it's dealt with. The computer I'm on right now, the tabs are closed except what I'm on right now. So there's nothing that's going to pop up and distract me. You create an environment for yourself where you're not going to be distracted, so you push them away. Even like in a hotel, if anybody's ever stayed in a hotel, you've got that sign on the door, do not disturb. If you need to maintain focus for a period of time, it's simple, fundamental ideas. Put a note on your door that says, do not disturb. I have to say that, we're in the state in the world right now where a lot of people are working from home or different locations and so forth. And I'm in my home right now, and I do have a sign on the door that says, do not disturb, because there's a chance that one of my children will show up. And if they don't know that I'm on the show, they'll come in the door just to say hello, right, when they get home. And because right now I'm in France and it's the end of the day here. So you kind of set your environment up to protect yourself from distractions. So first of all, you've made a commitment to yourself. Then you set a framework that, okay, I'm not going to be distracted. And you know what? If you get distracted, like it's not likely I'm going to get distracted in the middle of this podcast. But when I'm working on something else here, I always have this. This is just a notebook. And I have a pen. And if I'm working on a project, maybe I'm writing an ebook or something, or I'm preparing for it, I will put this aside me and I'll write down a note. When your mind starts having things show up, Ted, if you've ever had this happen, maybe in the middle of the podcast, you something like you get your own notifications going off in your brain, right? And it's like, that's important, but I need to note it down. So I'll grab the notebook and I'll write it down, but I won't focus on the idea. I'll just make a note and I'll leave it aside for later. So that you're just pushing it aside. You're protecting your mental space. Pardon me?
I love that. I want to tell you a secret, like something that I do, because if you don't think to carry a notebook, When I'm on my phone, I take pictures of the things I want to work on later. So if something comes up, I'm reading an article, I'm seeing a post, instead of having a notebook, I take a picture of it, and that is sort of my notebook. And then I go back to the pictures I took, and it always triggers what I was going to do with it. I don't write everything down about it, but I know once I see it, it triggers what I'm supposed to do. But that allows me to continue to focus on what I'm focusing on and leave that for when I'm done focusing on this and I can focus on that. So that is excellent. For me, I don't think about the notebook, although I wish I did. Taking the pictures is how I keep track. That's sort of my notebook.
And this, Ted, what you shared is an awesome idea. It's a really good idea. Yes, because it's a way of filing something. So then you just go back and you look on your photos that you have on your phone. Oh yes, that's what I have to work on. But the moment it takes you to take that picture is a split second, but it doesn't become a distraction. And we are
Correct.
overstimulated in this world right now. And the challenge is that our brains have become used to being overstimulated. And this is something, it's like our brains crave the overstimulation, but the overstimulation has a real negative impact. In fact, when you take a moment to be quiet, I'm pretty sure those of you that are listening or watching this have had the experience, kind of as we call an aha moment, where you have an idea that comes to you because you're not overstimulated. So yes, I just saw a little comment there. Somebody, they emailed, what did they say there?
A whole bunch of people are commenting. Hi Eddie. He emails the thought and ideas and also uses Trello boards to organize thoughts. So everybody's got their thing, right? You have to find something so that you can have that split second thing that doesn't distract you, so you can continue to focus and concentrate. But you have to have something. Otherwise, you're going to go, oh, hold on a second, I got to do this. You've been in meetings with people like this, right? The ones who are always on their phone. Oh, it'll only take a minute. Hello. And then they get back to you and they completely have no idea what you've been talking about or where you're at.
Exactly. Everybody develops a tool. And I will share just an awareness thing for a lot of people. Our short-term memory, like the RAM in the computer, is not massively sophisticated. And one of the reasons years ago that phone numbers were usually between 6 to 9 digits was because we were able to remember 6 to 9 digits in our short-term memory. Now, of course, now we often have the area codes in different parts of the world, but that we've taken into account that our memory is able to chunk things. So, for example, in British Columbia, Canada, it's 604 is the postal code, the area code. It could be 204. So you have, and you know what it is, the first piece, but then you still just have to remember usually about 7 digits. And when we take that stress away from our brain by having a technique like Ted to photograph, or the gentleman there that mentioned, I believe you said Eddie, he emails to himself, and myself with the notebook, we all have a certain tool. And what the idea is, make that tool easy to access so it doesn't take you away from the task at hand. That's the key. Because as you mentioned there, Ted, if it takes a long time for you to put aside that piece of information, you're going to lose where you're at, what you're focused on. And the next step I want to share with everybody that's listening is that once you decide on the task, you're committed to it, you've put aside as much of the distractions as you can, you've got something available to deal with the distractions, you also want to isolate how much time you're going to spend on the task. Now, if you're not really good at focusing, like some people, they practice focusing their mind through, for example, meditation, and some people think they have to do it for like 20 minutes or something. Start with a very short period of time. If you have to write an article, say, I'm going to work on it for 5 minutes. Okay. See if you can keep focused for 5 minutes. And that's what you want to do, is train your mind. When you train your mind, you're going to change your world. But it takes just a step after another step. It's like when you're working on your muscles going to the gym. It doesn't instantly become strong, your body. You have to work on it.
Which is why I don't work out, David.
What's that?
Which is why I don't work out, David. I need instant.
Yes, instant, right? So what
let
do you want to do?
Let me ask you a question.
Yes, please.
Let me ask you a question. So I think a lot of people are like me, and I I feel like I work best because I have trained myself to do this. I work best when I know I'm on a tight deadline, and that is where I feel like I am most focused. The
Yes.
problem with that is that it stresses me out because I have to get it done because I've left myself no room. But if I want to work on something I know is due for 3 weeks, I'm probably going to wait 2 weeks and 5 days or 6 days. I have 3 weeks, and I'm going to put it off. And I think a lot of people are guilty of that. Is that a good place to be? Is that a positive, or should we try to build more time in to be more focused and concentrated?
This is a very good question, Ted. And I will say that you look at what's working for you and you follow that practice. If it's working for you to put yourself, for some people, they wait till the last minute and they get more focused. I'm not sure it's a perfect scenario for you, but what I do is, well, like I'm not talking about you personally, but in general for most people, because when you push yourself, you may forget something, you may not have the time to do it. And like, for example, if I'm responding to an email and that, I will take the time actually to respond to an email and put it in a draft and then look at it again before I send it, because I don't want to rush through it because there's no tone or anything involved. And I want to make sure it's sharing what I intended to. The same when I write in that. What I can suggest, if you can give yourself what I would call a false deadline. If you have 3 weeks from now to have something done, you can say to yourself, why don't I see if I can do it in a week? And give yourself a written deadline. Because I've done this for my website. I created a course. I was on a podcast about 3 weeks ago. And on the podcast, I committed to creating a workbook and actually the course on how to find and follow your purpose. And I had for a long time shared with people, clients, and that information about how to find and follow your purpose, but I'd never written it down. And I said I was going to do it within a week, which was an amazingly short period of time for me to suggest I could write a book and put together the course, which involved audio and video content. But I set myself that timeline of 1 week. But in fact, once I got off the podcast, I said, I better plan to do this in 4 days, because who knows what's going to happen after that period of time. So that's kind of like a false deadline. I knew that I would have a buffer in space in case something happened. Technology blew up, something happened in my family, but I didn't want to wait till the last minute. I would caution people about waiting till the last minute. It's not the greatest of strategies, but for definitely writing yourself a deadline when you don't have a deadline, like somebody wants to write a book and they say, well, I have my whole life to write it. You probably won't write it. So you give yourself a deadline, and you may want to, make yourself accountable by telling somebody else. You don't necessarily have to tell somebody on a live event, like I did, but you actually just say, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to commit to it. And then you write it down and you keep yourself focused. Does that answer it all? Does that help, Ted? Would giving yourself?
Exactly. Yes, I think what you're saying is true. I've done the false deadline before, and it works for me when I remember to do it.
Okay.
And it's this internal clock that you've started ticking. And if you can adhere to that, I try not to let myself think that I have a buffer. But like I have something that I had a project I had to finish by tomorrow,
Yes.
and I started it this morning.
Okay.
And it's just, but I agree with what you're saying, and I want to focus more on that. I think a lot of times too, David, which is probably in what you're going to talk about. I'm sorry I got you off topic, but
it's okay. No, I'm listening.
I feel like people, because of social media, people literally, like you said, they have trained their minds to be overstimulated, and when they're not, they feel empty, or they feel like they're being lazy. I've heard that. They feel like they're not doing something they're supposed to be doing. Because if you put this phone down for 12 hours, try it once. Try it for 3 hours. Not when you're sleeping. That doesn't count. But people have been conditioned. They are conditioned to have all of these windows open in their head, these tabs open. And they don't know how to calm down or to focus or to concentrate anymore, I feel like.
Okay, we're going to talk. I'm going to offer a potential solution to that right now. But one thing I will suggest to you that you can have, Ted, is that let's say your deadline is next Wednesday, like I had, but I get it done by Sunday. You could reward yourself by getting it done earlier than anticipated. And in fact, I do reward myself, because if I get it done 3 days early, like the podcast that I was, not the podcast, pardon me, the workbook and the actual course done, I had more time to do other things. But instead of working on another work project, I gave myself the opportunity to go rock climbing, because I mentioned that story before, I'm back rock climbing. And if anybody wants to learn how to really focus their mind and be in the moment, rock climbing is a great way of doing this, because when you're, 30 meters, 100 feet off the ground, and you're clipping into the next pin, you need to be focused. And I'm not recommending everybody does that, because everybody has their own way. But I train my mind in many different parts of my life. And one idea I'm going to share, which people are probably familiar with, but the whole idea is to take action. And that is to sit down and be quiet. We're talking my version of, shall we say, quiet time or mindfulness or meditation, where you sit down and you're just nothing complicated. You just put your hand on your chest. Okay, here, I got the cable in the way, and your hand on your stomach, and you just breathe and you listen to your breathing. You're not counting, you're not doing anything, you're just feeling your breathing. So you're being very, very simple in your action, but your focus is on your breath. So you're just breathing, and you can, with your hand on your chest, you'll feel your heart. You'll start to get more connected with yourself. And the hand on your stomach, you should feel you're moving your diaphragm. You can feel your breath moving. So you're becoming more connected to yourself. And you can do this. This can actually be a very comforting thing to do for just a couple of minutes. But what you're doing is you're practicing focusing on something, and not requiring yourself to have an application on a phone to practice focusing. You're not requiring yourself to have a candle that you have to go find and light and sit in a location. You could, as long as you're not driving, you could do this action. If you're stopped in traffic for a moment, maybe you could, but you can practice just paying attention to yourself. And the whole idea is we're training our mind. And I'm really, really like to share with people the simplest possible things that you can get off this podcast and practice right away. Perhaps, I don't know if you've ever heard of people doing this, but I look for this simple idea, Ted. It's like, how can you train your mind to be calm?
The simplicity part is so important, I think, for people. There are tons of apps out there, like you mentioned. I learned in college, breathing was super important. And if I could take the time to focus on my breathing, if I could concentrate on my breathing, my breaths in, my breaths out, that there was something that calmed my mind with that. And it took away all of the external things that were impacting me. And so over the years, I've gotten worse at it. But I remember there was a time when there was any big exam coming up or I had something stressful going on. I would literally just close my eyes wherever I was at and focus on my breaths in and out. And it just helped. It was one moment where I could do something so simple. I didn't have apps back then. I didn't have 25 YouTube videos I could watch or 150. It was just me and my breathing. And that's why breathing is so important. That's for a whole nother topic. But that is one way where you can focus, where if you really put your mind to it, you can focus, and it's simple. You can do it without any extra added things that you have to purchase, like you said.
Exactly. And that's the key that I always, really the Wonder Technique is bringing people down to fundamentals that they can do right away. You can teach children, you can teach adolescents, you can teach adults, people of any age, how to just sit down, or even you can be standing and put your hand on your chest and hand on your stomach, and you become aware of your heartbeat, you become aware of your breathing, and you're just listening to it. And I remember, like, some people, they like to say something or they like to count. And the simplest version that I ever heard of that was from Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a Zen Buddhist monk. Some people might have heard of a book that he wrote, Peace is Every Step. Peace is every step. And he said that when you breathe in, you say the word in, and when you breathe out, you say the word out. So it's not very sophisticated. It's not very complicated. And so it's easy for people to do. And sometimes people get lost in the counting of numbers, or they get lost in the voice of a person they're listening to. I really, really work on helping people they get their center inside themselves. So it's not, I mean, I'm nothing against all the application, the app makers is that, but that's an external thing. More and more you focus on the control of yourself, you can adapt in different situations. Because once again, back to the rock climbing, when I've had moments for sure when I'm trying to find the next place to put my hands and put my feet, and I have to keep focused, and I use my breathing to do that. I can't turn to anything else.
I think I have a pet peeve to throw out there. One of the things that makes me crazy is when people are not focused or concentrating and there is a limited amount of time. For example, if I'm in a meeting with you, and I did it earlier, and all you do is pick up the phone in the meeting, the clear message is this: I'm not important.
Yes.
And you're not focused or concentrated on me. And so all of you people that do that during meetings, I'm just putting you on notice. But it's also not good for what you're trying to accomplish. You're obviously meeting with me or meeting with someone. It could be investors. It could be potential new clients. And if you are not focused on them, if you can't figure out how to focus for a short amount of time, even 30-minute meeting, a 30-minute call, then that's where the things that David are talking about, you can put into play to try to help you. Because trust me, the message that you're giving that potential client, that potential investor, is that they're not important. And that's not how you're feeling, but you have conditioned yourself to immediately grab this, or immediately look off, or immediately do anything else but what's right in front of you. And so these tools, I think, in this conversation are so important, because it's rampant now. It's epidemic, the way people are with their phones and the way that they do not know how to focus or concentrate.
Yes. Very, very good point, Ted. And for those people watching or listening, and I appreciate and value your time, let me tell you, I've been, when I was younger, extraordinarily distracted. So my mind was all over the place. Teachers in school would say, well, David, he would be a better student if he was more focused, if he wasn't daydreaming. So I have so many ideas dancing in my mind that I need to control my mind, and that's I've had to do over time. So I believe if I've been able to get everything into control here, that hopefully some of the, and the things that have worked for me is the simplest things. And I incorporate it in all of my life. Like right now, during this event here with Ted, I'm in this moment. There's nothing else. I'm not thinking about anything else, but that comes with training. Now, you can also train your mind as well as through breathing, as I mentioned there before, and Ted talked about that as well, is through reading a book and actually testing when you read a book, do you remember what you just read? Okay, because some people, they read what we call diagonally, and they're not really that focused. So I know people, they say, oh, I read a book in 3 days, and like, really fantastic, tell me about it. And after a couple of sentences, there's no information because they were reading but not remembering. And when you can train your mind to be focused by reading a book and then, reading a paragraph and, okay, do I remember what's going on? Yes. Then you progress to the next. And also to help you focus, very simple tool. And if I don't have a book handy to show you, but I read with either my finger to focus my mind. A lot of times I highlight as well, things that are important. Very simple, probably very old-fashioned for a lot of people, but it keeps my mind where I am. I'm at that moment. Here's where I want to be. And in fact, when they study people that are more effective readers and retain more information, using a finger or a pen to underline things actually helps your mind stay more focused. So you're again training, and it becomes part of your life. And that's beneficial. So I would recommend to people that maybe try reading, or try both, what we talked about today. Now, keeping me really focused here, I know we're almost at the end of the time, Ted. So I have to respect that because there's lots of things happening and we're doing great.
Your topics and your insights are just so positive and powerful, and people are hungry for this information. We could talk about it for hours, but back to the no attention span that we all tend to have or struggle with. Go ahead, I'll let you wrap it up however you would.
Okay, I will just share with people, if you're interested in more about how to focus and concentrate so you can achieve your goals, I do already have an online course that is with that topic. There's a workbook, there's video, there's audio. And I never mentioned this before, Ted, that I have 10 courses right now, and people pay a monthly fee. They actually pay very little. They pay €7 for access and can do whatever course they want to do at their own pace, because I'm a great believer in making sure the information is available at a very accessible cost. So people can come on, they can do, we talked last time about how to sleep well and wake up energized, but you'll see the common thread of how I try and bring everything together. That's at thewondertechnique.com.
Always a pleasure to have you on. It's always a topic that is just so critical for people to kind of figure out their path. I think it's tools that you provide are just awesome, David. I'm so thankful that we're continuing to do this series of important topics, and thank you for being you and for sharing your journey. I appreciate it. All right, so thewondertechnique.com, David Hennessey, thank you so much. Y'all reach out to him if you have any questions, want to learn more. I mean, he is what he is right here. This is what you get, and it's a great guy with an amazing message. Thanks, David.
Thank you very much, Ted, and thank you everybody for taking the time to listen. Take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful day.
Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.